Welcome to Happily Ever After is just the beginning. Keeping your relationship not just together, but happy, and we mean truly happy, is part art and part science. You've come to the right place. Here's your host, Leslie Dories.
Several years ago, I was hiking with my mom when she calmly stated that she didn't think women should have to ask for what they want. And it was a good thing I was behind her because I do not have a poker face, and she did not see my jaw drop to the ground. I thought, wow, the mind-reading school of relationships, how's that working for you? And I realized that the appeal of this way, I really do. I recognize the appeal of thinking this way, that it goes along with the soulmate fantasy and that if you really loved me, you would know concept. And it lets me off the hook for both identifying and communicating what makes me feel loved and connected in a relationship. How great is that? But a second part of the problem is that you're left guessing about what it is that would make your partner happy, and if you guess wrong, no matter how sincere your effort might have been, you find yourself in hot water. So with the comfort provided by traditional rules now gone, and the ones for modern intimate relationships not really very well established, is there a way to make it work? Well, I got great news for you, because author and founder of Compassion Power, Dr. Stephen Stosny, is here with some good news on that question. So, Dr. Stosny, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this natural but very confusing situation of being in long-term intimate relationships.
Yeah, unfortunately, our brains didn't really evolve for that. For one thing,
that's not good news.
The emotional part of our brains was fully developed when the life expectancy was 27, so you didn't have to worry that much about long-term relationships.
Yeah, back then it was just surviving till the next day.
Right, and you didn't have to worry about quality of life. Whenever we're in survival mode, we don't even think of quality.
Right. So you wrote a really interesting article that appeared on Psychology Today's website called What Your Partner Needs to Hear You Say. And the one thing I loved about this is you instructed all of us to repeat out loud 3 times. I don't know what the hell I'm doing when it comes to making a modern intimate relationship work. I love that. And so here's the question. Why do we need to not just hear this, but actually say it out loud repetitively?
Well, it's because ego gets in the way of really learning how to make a relationship work, because like your mother, we think we should know. But actually, there's no way we could know. The historical models have broken down. Gender roles have broken down. The biggest factors are the death of the extended family, which is about 70 years ago now. When I was a kid even, I'm not quite that old, but when I was a kid, you would rarely have a nuclear family that's 2 parents and children living alone together. You would always have Grandma up in the attic, Aunt Sally down in the basement, and Uncle Fred in the guest room.
Now, wait a minute. Are you Southern?
No. I was in New Jersey. That's the way it was. And if they weren't in the
crazy ants in the attic down here.
Well, we have them in New Jersey, too.
Well, I mean, and that's really true. We are terribly, terribly isolated. Plus, you know, as I tell people, we're now on 2nd and 3rd generation divorces. So sometimes there isn't even an intact nuclear family.
Yes, that's right. And you see, the rise in family violence directly parallels the decline of the extended family. It's almost a pure inverse relationship because it protected you from child abuse because your kid wore you out. You sent him upstairs to irritate Grandma for a while when she couldn't take it anymore. Right. And Sally would take over. And you didn't have as much domestic violence with the brother-in-law living next door.
Interesting. Well, yeah, because people would know. There wasn't, yes,
right.
There might still be some quiet behind closed doors. And I think that's also part of the problem now, because we also have social media where everybody puts their best face forward on social media, which really distorts this whole thing even more, because those people over there aren't having any difficulties. Really?
Well, if they're on social media all the time, they're probably not noticing each other.
Well, yeah, which again can be problematic. So other than the breakdown of the extended family, what are some of the other...
Also, marrying for love is only 200 years old. And marriage was not designed for love. It was a social, political alliance, and you would start at a very low level of interest, trust, compassion, and love, and there's nowhere to go but up. We start at a very high level of love, compassion, interest, an unsustainable level, really, and there's nowhere to go but down. So nature and history doesn't prepare you for modern intimate relationships, so you've got to learn how to do it. And it's going to look a little different with each couple because the emotional demands on couples are so much greater now, and they're idiosyncratic for a lot of people. In other words, the emotional meaning that you give to the same events and behaviors are not the same that your husband will give, because he has an opposite vulnerability, a different temperament. We seek those things out in our partners. A different family history. I assume he's not your brother.
And what's even the oddest thing is, even if you come from the same family, you don't have the same family history, because you experience things different from your siblings.
That's true, and your parents mature as they get older. So there's an old saying in family therapy: no siblings have the same parents.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, and I've noticed when I work with my couples that is one of the. In fact, I've actually kind of termed it like the biggest challenge is, this person over here doesn't think like me, experience life like me, behave like me. Now, what the heck am I supposed to do with him?
Well, allow it to enrich your life, because we really do seek out the differences. There's no me harmony. You don't want someone just like you. You might as well live by yourself.
Right.
We want those differences, and I think the secret of modern relationships is cherish as many differences as you can, appreciate as many as you can, and tolerate the ones you can't cherish or appreciate.
I love that. So you mention in this article that the best approach to a successful relationship is for each partner to say to the other, teach me how to love you, and I will teach you how to love me. And so this is a really interesting concept, because we don't experience love in the same way. The things that matter to us, may not be the same thing. We might have some agreement, yes, like we want to have children and or raise them in this particular way, but we can go way off track on that one too. So you break this down into a formula, and I'd like to kind of take us through that formula. So I'd like to talk about the first two steps, and what are the first two steps in this formula of teaching each other how to love each other?
Okay, well, let me give you a little background first. See, people don't really know. You don't think about what will make you feel loved, and the reason we think about what doesn't make us feel loved, but not really what does. And the reason for that is it's not really being loved that feels so good. It's being loving. And that's kind of hard to see sometimes, because it's so much easier to be loving if you are loved. Yes. But it's being loving that makes all the difference, because it doesn't feel good to be loved if you don't feel lovable. You feel like you're getting something you don't deserve or something you can't return. So it's really being loving, and that was the background. I wanted people to think about what's going to make you feel loved, and also it's the. I developed the Power Love formula about 30 years ago, which is based on if you want to love big, you have to think small. It's really very small moments, frequent small moments of connection. Since then, Barbara Fredrickson has written a couple of books. She's a researcher. She's not a therapist. She called the one I like the best is called Micro Moments of Love.
Oh, what a great title!
Yeah, where her data shows that it's very small moments of connection, like a brief eye contact, you pass by each other and just reach out and touch. Nothing big, but it creates this attitude of connection. And that not only makes people happier in their relationships, but they're physically healthier, according to her data. So that's what I was going after, these small moments of connection.
Well, and that makes sense. Yeah.
And think about what they are. So you start out by, like I would, if you're my wife, I will ask you, what can I do that would make you feel loved? And what would you say, just off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head would be, if we want to talk love languages, I'm an acts of service kind of person. So if you actually did something for me, so one of the things that makes me feel loved is when it's my night to do the dishes and I come in to clean up the kitchen and my husband's already done it, and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel so loved.
Okay, and I could do that if I'm your husband. I could do the dishes now and then when it's your turn, not every night, but. But now and then.
Feel loved because then he'd feel taken advantage of. But yeah.
Right. Of course, but the second part of it is, so you want to make it easier for people to do what you want. We tend to be resentful, and that makes it hard for people to do what we want. We want to make it easy. So I say, I can do that. I can wash the dishes. But you know what will make it easier for me to do that? If you would appreciate it when I do.
Oh, yeah.
And you could do that, right? So you are doing something to help me make you feel loved, and I am doing something to make you feel loved. It's reciprocity. And that's really what, you got to feel loving in order to, you got to be loving in order to feel loved. That's really what that's about.
And that can be a problem because you mentioned the R word, the resentment, and when I work with couples, it's like, well, you do this because, and it's like, well, but then when's my partner going to do this? I said, no, it doesn't work that way. It's like somebody's got to step up and start the loving cycle.
Yeah, I have. Every marriage therapist has gotten that. Why should I be the one to have to do this? Why should I? The answer always has to be because you want a better life.
Right.
and you got to answer that yourself. Why do I have to? I said do it myself now and then. Why do I have to do all this work for clients? Well, because I want to be a better person.
Right, and that's partially why we're together, and it's really interesting because I was working with a couple last night, and he, there have been some problems, and he kind of dug down into it, and he goes, well, I'm just selfish. I said, yeah, but you can't be selfish and happily married.
Actually, what I say to people who say that, if you really are selfish, you will be happily married, because if you're really selfish, you're going to value the most important person in your life. And that will create happiness. It's self-destructive to devalue someone you value.
Right.
So true selfishness will lead to a happy marriage, but what somebody who says they're selfish means is they don't want to think about their partners, and they don't see how self-destructive that is.
Right, they get caught into this. Because early on, when we're in relationships, we're always thinking about, what can I do to make my partner feel good and feel wonderful and feel special? And then somewhere along the line, it shifts to, what have you done for me lately? And to me, that's that deadly shift, because obviously, what you were talking about earlier about those micro moments, somehow they've stopped.
Well, I think it's because we do marry on such a high level of interest and love, and it has to come down because it consumes too much resources, too much mental resources, too much interest. We've got to